My name is Ashley Cawthon. My social justice issue is poverty in education, decreasing the income achievement gap. This is for Educational Leadership, Spring 2014. I chose this topic because it's kind of near and dear to my heart. I've worked in many Title I funding schools for the past 10 years, and I've worked with a lot of low income students and kind of seen some of the struggles that comes with being from a low income family. I really believe that education is a tool to overcoming poverty. So, giving these children a good, solid education, I believe, is what will help them to eventually overcome poverty, hopefully. Um, so, instead of just focusing on poverty and choosing three articles that dealt with poverty, I wanted to kind of narrow the topic down to one thing. And so I found this article about the widening income achievement gap, which touches on poverty. And so my other articles that I chose relate to this topic, and I also pulled in some other information as well that related to the topic. So basically, the widening income achievement gap. The income achievement gap refers to the disparities between education among students from low income families as versus students from high income families. If we do not find ways to reduce the growing inequality in education outcomes between the rich and the poor, schools will no longer be the great equalizer we want them to be. And that comes from my main article, which is by Sean Reardon, and it's called The Widening Income Achievement Gap, and it comes from Educational Leadership. My second article, Poverty is an important factor in determining the success of children. It's unfortunate that it does, but poverty has an enormous influence on student achievement. And that is by Peter DeWitt, and it comes from High Quality Preschool Isn't an Option for Children in Poverty, and that is also from Educational Leadership. And my third article, Though poverty has been a concern for many decades in relation to education, it is becoming a larger concern as the poverty rates in the U.S. continue to grow. And that is from the ETS Center for Research on Human Capital and Education, and the article is entitled Poverty and Education, Finding the Way Forward. So within the main article about the widening income achievement gap, it had some issues that it touched upon about what did it find as a result of the study that this author conducted. And then later it talks about how to overcome the income achievement gap, and then some solutions to some further solutions I have suggested as well about how to overcome the income achievement gap. So first of all, the first finding was that the income achievement gap has grown significantly in the last 3 decades. Today, the income achievement gap between the poor and the non-poor is twice as large as the achievement gap between black and white students. And they also found that more than 1 in 5 children in the U.S. are living in poverty today. And in 2011, 48% of students in the U.S. qualified for free or reduced price meals. So we can see that poverty is a large issue in education today. My graphic shows, you can see the states that their poverty rates in 2000, and you can see that not many states fell at 50% or less back then, but up to 2011 and today, there are many more states that have a 50% or higher rate of poverty. So poverty is a large issue and a growing issue in education. The second finding of Sean Reardon's study about the income achievement gap was that income gaps and other measures of education success have grown as well. The college completion rate among children from high-income families has grown sharply in the last few decades, but the completion rate for students from low-income families has barely moved. Standardized test scores are lower amongst low-income students than high-income students, and this can have an effect on failure rates and school completion amongst this demographic. Reading achievement gaps between students of low income and high income families are 40% larger today than they were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And even social gaps are developing between low income students and high income students in behaviors such as participating in extracurricular activities, sports, and academic clubs, volunteering and participating in community life, and self-reports of trust. The third finding of his study was that the income achievement gap is already large when children enter kindergarten, and it does not significantly grow significantly as they progress through school. They have found that children in or near poverty begin their lives at a disadvantage. Poor children are less likely to be read to and are less likely to experience center based and high quality daycare. And then I found something that talks about the importance of having a high quality preschool. It says it could potentially narrow the achievement gap, but low income families traditionally cannot afford high quality preschool or early childhood education for their children. And then a study conducted in 2004 found that professional parents spoke over 2,000 words per hour to their children. Working class parents spoke about 1,300, and welfare mothers spoke about 600. So by the age of 3, children of professionals' vocabularies were nearly 50% greater than those of working class children, and twice as large as those of welfare children. So you can see that children from low income families are also coming in with very limited vocabulary, and that can certainly have an effect on their reading foundation. Okay, the rest of the slide kind of focuses on what has been done to help decrease the income achievement gap already, and then the rest of the portion will focus on what can be further done to help decrease the income achievement gap. So what has already been done is the Head Start program has been in effect since 1960, and it's basically a federally funded program for an early childhood program for low-income students. Though the program has had a positive effect on the children it serves socially and academically, it has not shown any significant impact on education beyond third grade and is not offered everywhere. Inadequate and poor nutrition is linked to concentration issues, low academic achievement, and a decreased ability to learn. Since this is typically an issue for low-income families, the National School Lunch Program was started to combat this issue. Students from low-income families are provided lunch at school totally free or at a reduced price if they meet the income requirements for the program. So we know that if students from low-income families may not be able to afford a lot of food or adequate food, so the school lunch program has been put in place to kind of help out with providing that nutrition that everybody needs. And then the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 was based on the premise that setting high standards and establishing measurable goals could improve individual outcomes in education. Basically, it wanted to expand the role in education through annual testing, annual academic progress, teacher qualifications, and funding. There's been widespread criticism of No Child Left Behind since it was put into place. Many feel standardized testing is not a great indicator of student learning, as it judges students and teachers based on the basic set of standards, the same basic set of standards, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, learning style, or class. Currently, states around the country have signed waivers that allow them to move away from No Child Left Behind's stringent guidelines and develop their own set of assessments that better reflect and demonstrate student learning across the spectrum. Title I funding, which I talked about a little bit earlier, of this Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 is the largest federal grant program in the U.S. and is aimed at funding for low-income students. Districts are allowed to use these funds for curriculum needs, program services, and support that target servicing the needs of economically disadvantaged students. There are 4 components to Title I funding. First component is basic grants. The second one is concentration grants. These allocate funding to each school district based on the U.S. Census Bureau estimates of the number of children in poverty and the average per pupil spending of states. These 2 grants comprise about 54% of the total Title I funding, and schools must have 15% poverty rate to receive concentration grants. The other 2 grants to the funding is targeted assistant grants and education finance incentive grants, which comprise 23% of the funding, both of those. And though it does provide funding for program support and staff targeted at helping economically disadvantaged students, acquiring the funds is a tricky process, and larger districts tend to receive more funding than smaller districts or rural areas where poverty may be an issue. So here are some suggested further solutions to help decrease the income achievement gap in education. The first one is that states and school districts should devote a greater share of resources and efforts to the earliest grades, including kindergarten and preschool. Because achievement gaps are self-perpetuating, the earlier we intervene to reduce them, the more effective we will be at eliminating them. So basically, here are kind of some components to that suggestion. We should have state funding for all all economically disadvantaged students to have quality early education, childhood education. So some efforts have been made to remedy this, but many low-income students are still not being offered high quality um, education or federally funded early childhood education. And then also making kindergarten mandatory for all children beginning at the age of 5 and funding for full day kindergarten across the U.S. Another further solution to decrease the income achievement gap is growing evidence suggests that more time in school may help to narrow academic achievement gaps if the added time is used effectively. So extending the school year, extending the school day, providing after school and before school programs, and providing summer school programs can help. Another solution is that states and school districts can do more to ensure that all students have equal access to high quality teachers, stimulating curriculum, and instruction and adequate school resources. Um, so basically, to help that would be funding increases for all districts nationwide, providing adequate resources to support learning for teachers, including technology, as many students living in poverty do not have the same access outside of school to technology that students from high-income families have. Common Core standards come into play. One of the main goals of Common Core standards is to erase the achievement gap, which has been created partly due to poverty. I also address the concerns with No Child Left Behind and how states are now signing waivers that allow them to create more individualized assessments for students. And then my own idea, which has been a kind of recent development in the past years, is incorporating blended learning, problem-based learning, and differentiated instruction into classrooms. As a library media specialist, my role in decreasing the income achievement gap is providing resources for students and staff. Students from low-income families may not have access to technology or many resources at home, so my role would be to provide those resources and access to technology that they can use. I have a somewhat flexible schedule that allows me to work with students on a more individualized basis, so I can be a support for the classroom or pull students to work on areas of need. Um, I work with students in the building regardless of learning ability. This means a responsibility to not only get to know the students' academic abilities, but also their interests. And this is important when selecting materials for students to have access to, as well as knowing what resources needs my staff and students have. Being involved in data meetings, helping to make school improvement plans, as well as helping to make policies means I'm able to plan effective instruction that helps all students learn and grow and relate instruction to what they are learning in class, because we have learned that students need to know why they're learning what they're learning and how it relates to their lives. And then also attending professional development, continuing education courses, and professional reading can be beneficial in keeping up to date with the issues of poverty and the ways that I can support these students. Here are my 3 primary resources that I talked a little bit about. And then here are 3 secondary resources that I pulled a little bit of information in from. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.